Ladies and gentlemen, what is up, and welcome today to the top 5 mutants in Marvel Contest of Champions as of November 2017. So, I've had so many requests to go back and do this video series because we've already done this twice in the past. We did it around March this year, around patch 12.0, just after that wonderful update came. But we didn't really have much info on Archangel, Iceman, or Psylocke, so we kind of left those out of the list, and quite a lot has changed in terms of Marvel Contest of Champions between now and then, and there, you know, the mutant class especially, like Archangel, Iceman, and Psylocke, mainly Archangel and Iceman, have really increased the value of the mutant class. It was already one of the strongest classes in game, but now it is just so incredibly competitive in terms of, you know, who you want to rank up and which characters you want to invest your resources in, because there are 19 champions, and I would say a good, 14, 15 of those champions are super awesome and super fun to play. But anyway, we're going to be focusing on the top 5, and then once we've talked about the top 5, going to give a ton of honorable shout-outs to champions that I quite like, and also, just as a disclaimer, we're going to leave OG Deadpool out of this ranking list because he hasn't been available for almost, what is it, a year and a half now, so he's a pretty relevant champion for the majority of the player base. However, I would like to start my list off at number 5, which is Rogue. Rogue actually was number 1 the last time I did this ranking list, and it was mainly, I was valuing prestige a lot more back then, but with kind of the move to 5 stars that's going on at the moment, and a lot of people, going for Labyrinth for getting rank 4 champions, especially 4-star champions, they've really fallen out of the prestige race. So we're going to throw all prestige aside when it comes to this one in terms of ranking, and purely talk about the characters and their abilities. So Rogue, absolutely fantastic champion. She is a special one, which steals health based on the amount of damage she does. So this scales amazingly well. With the Suicide Mastery, she can actually recover a significantly more amount of health with the Suicide Masteries by using the special one, especially if she's awakened and you get the crit. Especially in top alliances that run map 6, and people that were lucky enough to pick up a 5-star Rogue and have her awakened, they absolutely love this character. Cannot stop talking about how awesome Rogue is, and I get a lot of the hype. I'm running a Suicide Mastery build myself at the moment, and Rogue is so fantastic, and especially combined with, like champion boosts, anything that increases her damage, like a flare node. If you're in like Assassin's range and you have that mastery, then the healing just gets really crazy on Rogue. So there are really some clever circumstances and scenarios where you can really get an awesome amount of benefit out of Rogue's lifesteal, but simultaneously, there are circumstances, the fact that it is based on the damage dealt, where this can sometimes be a negative, say if the damage is somewhat capped, or you have a class disadvantage. So yeah, sometimes there can be negatives when, attack reductions are in the mixed. So the special one, that is a lifesteal, and also you can replicate up to 5 of the opponent's active buffs, and if you play very aggressively, you can continue to keep those up, and while you are holding a buff, your opponent can't gain any buffs. So for example, a really good matchup that I believe with Rogue is actually Crossbones, because you can use the special one, get the Fury, and then if you're playing very aggressively, you're always going to have the Fury on Rogue, which is giving you more damage, potentially more lifesteal as well, and also depriving Crossbones of getting any Fury buffs at all. So that's a really awesome matchup for Rogue there. Special Attack 2 has a Power Steal, which doesn't seem, too amazing, but it deals a lot of damage as well, and it's 9% of the opponent's power per hit, and there are 3 hits. And again, this can crit, and the crit either on the Life Steal or the Special 2, which is the Power Steal when awakened, has, yeah, I think it's like a 200% multiplier on what you would get. So instead of like, let's say, assume you steal, 1,500 health with the awakened ability, if it is a crit, and that'll come up yellow, that's going to be around 4,500 health instead. So it's a really awesome awakened ability, which is kind of the icing on the cake there. Special Attack 3 also has a Power Steal, and can activate 1 buff per type that was replicated during the fight, and the buffs stay active as long as Rogue keeps touching the opponent, and touching the opponent also, if you attack into the block, it still refreshes the buff to keep it up. So yeah, I really like Rogue. She's an awesome champion, and also has reduced debuff duration of 70%. So this can be really, really useful in some matchups. You know, if you accidentally queue into like an abomination or mess up and take a bleed or something like that, or get any sort of negative effect, you know, she has a very, very short duration, which she'll shrug them off. And it could potentially be useful for those mesmerized nodes, which have like a 70... They're really rare nowadays, but there are a couple in Act 5 that have like a 7% chance for the opponent to evade and then randomly stun you, but if you have Rogue, the stun will just be over like that. So it's an interesting champion, you know, quite a bit of utility to play around there. And next up, we have a number 4, X23. X23, just an absolutely fantastic champion. Doesn't really benefit too much for Awakened ability, so she's absolutely awesome, even unawakened. Has a really, really decent regeneration, which has a 15% chance to trigger on any single attack, and also whenever she is attacked. And the regeneration is based on power stored. So with X23 and Wolverine, their regeneration works in exactly the same way. So you always have this option of like, oh, do I want to push out more special attacks and get more damage, or do I want to regen? But if you're running, for example, like the Suicide Masteries, you probably just want to stay at full power and then just keep on mashing into your opponent, and the regeneration will probably cover all of your parry damage and any damage taken from the Suicide Masteries. So that's pretty awesome. But X23, just an absolute monster in terms of her damage. Really great damage output. Critical hits have an 80% chance to bleed, scales really, really nicely with deep wounds, and if the opponent is bleed immune instead of getting a bleed, she actually gains a buff which increases her critical damage rating. So even against opponents that are bleed immune, she's still getting more and more damage for every crit that she lands, so that's really awesome there. And then, yeah, what else do we have? Not really too much apart from that on X23. When she's awakened, for every... if the opponent has 3 or more bleed stacks, or she has 3 or more cruelty stacks, her Assassin's Training kicks in, increasing her critical rating and critical damage by a bit. But again, this isn't super huge. It's only 312, which it's a nice bonus. That's probably around... to be honest, effectively, you know, with the diminishing returns, that's probably somewhere between 5 to 10%. It's not huge, but it's very nice to have for the character, obviously, when you're playing at that very, very aggressive tempo. But X23 is a favorite character for a lot of people. She's one of the best 5-star champions that you can get unawakened in the Crystal, and if you have this character as a 5-star, she's a great option for doing like an initial run of Labyrinth of Legends if you get her up to rank 4. So yeah, I really rate X23. She's pretty fantastic. And then we move to the top 3 champions, which I kind of think cast a little bit of a shadow over the rest of the mutant class, and it's really hard to give these 3 champions an order, because they all have different scenarios where they are good champions and bad champions, and hopefully as we go along I'll kind of explain that. But at number 3, I'm gonna put Wolverine. So Wolverine is one of the most OG original champions in this game, but he is just beast mode regeneration. So he's very, very similar in terms of his abilities to X23. The only difference is the Awakened ability. Instead of being that small boost to crit chance and crit damage, it is an 8% chance on every attack to recover what is roughly about 20 to 25% of his maximum health, based on, you know, the masteries that you have. If you have recovery, it's going to be around 25%, and also the dupe level. So Wolverine's regeneration is just absolutely bonkers. So 8% chance, that's like very roughly, you're going to see it like once in every 14 or so hits, along with the regeneration he has, which is standard like X23's. So yeah, you just have essentially double regen, very, very powerful, very, very effective champion. Wolverine is one of my favorite champions to use for Alliance Quest. Even with running the Suicide Mastery build, you just never use special attacks, you just sit on full power and you're just regenerating like an absolute beast, and he is just, in my opinion, the comeback king. You know, if you're having, because playing like Alliance Quest and stuff, you have scenarios where you'll kind of wake up and you'll be a little bit sleepy playing the game, and you might mess up and lose a ton of health in like one of your first fights, but then you can wake up a little bit, have your morning coffee, and then yeah, regen back up to 4 and just keep on going and going and going. So yeah, I love Wolverine. I think he's a fantastic champion, but when the opponent can't bleed, he's got very, very gimp damage output, just isn't a super desirable champion to play. So So that's probably his big disadvantage. And his damage, while alright, you know, isn't anything amazing if you're not using any of the special attacks. But it's pretty damn good regardless. And then at number 2, we have ya boy Archangel, who is just an absolute damage god. I would say in the right circumstances, and if you get the right RNG, because Archangel is very luck dependent, Archangel is probably the hardest hitting champion in the game, but that's providing that your opponent is not either bleed or poison immune. If your opponent is immune to bleed or poison, then Archangel goes from like this crazy gold tier champion to kind of, like he's a little bit rubbish when you don't, when you're not able to bleed the opponent, because Archangel essentially relies on getting a lot of bleeds off on the opponent, and then getting a few stacks of poison, and then combining those together to trigger a neurotoxin effect. And the neurotoxin deals a ridiculous amount of damage. It stuns on the expiry, and also when you have Archangel awakened, which I do consider quite important if you want to play the character at a high level. It reduces ability accuracy per stack, and ideally you want to get Archangel to dupe level. It's around 40 something, which gives every stack of neurotoxin a 33%, well 33.33% ability accuracy reduction, which means that when you've got 3 stacks of neurotoxin, nothing ability accuracy wise is going to trigger on your opponent. So stuff that can be negated by ability accuracy, it's stuff like regeneration, damage back, evade. So Archangel is just a fantastic counter for so many different champions in the game, but he's one of those champions where he's either like really amazing and you can just nuke the crap out of the opponent, or you know, you can't bleed or poison them and he's just a very like average champion. So yeah, Archangel, he is a very awesome champion in the right scenario there, but I really like Archangel, and ideally you need to be able to stun the opponent to play Archangel well, because it's just a lot of parries and heavy attacks. That's a great way to very aggressively generate bleeds. But then finally we are on to the number 1 champion, ladies and gentlemen, in the mutant class, who I consider just the all-around hero for the mutant class. Like it's Iceman, ladies and gentlemen. Iceman is just a friggin', he's a friggin' G. He's just the most awesome champion in the game, just because he can win so many matchups, and there are so many like interesting and creative ways to play Iceman. So Iceman, first and foremost, is a triple immunities champion. So he's immune to incinerate, bleed, and poison effects, which, you know, last month made him an absolutely fantastic counter to the newly added Mephisto, who has an aura of incineration. When awakened, Iceman starts the fight with an ability called Cold Snap, which prevents his opponent from triggering evade, and you can also reapply Cold Snap via the special one. So if you're fighting like stun immune evade champions, and if you're playing very aggressively, you can keep this buff up and prevent opponents from evading. So yeah, he's just really awesome for that. Additionally, he has a buff called Ice Armor, which essentially, while he has this, it prevents him from losing more than 5% of his maximum health from a single source. So this can be useful for two reasons. You can tank special freeze with it. He's a great matchup of champions, you know, like Mordo, Hyperion, to get to their special freeze, and sometimes, you know, it's a little bit difficult to bait those out. And also, you know, occasionally if you just slip up and maybe take an attack or two, like Iceman's Ice Armor can really help heavily negate a lot of damage there. And also, thirdly, another use for the Ice Armor is if Iceman would become stunned while his Ice Armor is active, the Ice Armor negates the effect and then it shatters. And Ice Armor takes 15 seconds to reform, but if you've got him awakened, it only takes 12 seconds to reform. So yeah, there's just so much stuff that Iceman can do. He's got really awesome damage. Every single one of his critical hits places a really heavy energy damage debuff on the opponent that deals damage. I think it's like 15 seconds or something after you land the crit. Like every crit has a 45% chance to place it, and it either expires after, it's only like 10-15 seconds, or you can use your heavy attack to detonate all of the stacks of frostbite. That's the name of the debuff there, dealing even more energy damage. So it can be very fun when you're getting into kind of the assassin's range and you've got quite a few stacks of frostbite on your opponent opponent just to like parry heavy attack and watch your opponent explode. So it's so much fun there. So yeah, aside from that, you also get you got 2 stacks of frostbite off the special one, as well as potentially more from the crits, as well as cold snap. The special attack 2, you can also use your ice armor to essentially convert the ice armor into a significant amount of additional attack for the duration of the special 2 attack. So this can actually be really awesome to use in like Assassin's range again. You know, if you're about to finish off the opponent, you've got your ice armor active, you're kind of near a special 2, you can push over and just like let off one of the hardest hits, and it's very gratifying. So yeah, and also the special 3, you get cold snap from that as well, which prevents evade, and also you can use your special 3 to instantly reform ice armor. So to be honest, there's just so many like creative ways and interesting stuff you can do with Iceman's armor and evade counter and all of his fun abilities. So like I really like Iceman. I think he's a fantastic champion to play. I went for him as a 5-star, and I use him in Alliance Quest, Alliance War all of the time. I absolutely friggin' love this champion. Works great with the Suicide Masteries as well. You know, if you want to play this champion with Suicide Masteries, you can just use the special 3. He's got insane damage. You're not bleeding, you're not poisoned at the start, so you're not going to take any kind of chip damage from those masteries anyway. So yeah, Iceman, he's just the absolute #1 bae. But then when we go back to the mutant class, just to give some champions a shout, because there are a lot of awesome champions in the mutant class. Gambit's quite fun to play with a special 1 stun, like really prominent stun on the special 1 there with Gambit. Psylocke has some alright power control, but I don't really regard Psylocke as more effective than Magic in a lot of scenarios. Nightcrawler is great for Alliance War defense and quite a fun champion to play if you switch him to swashbuckling mode. Cable's quite a fun character to play, has a little bit of regeneration, a little bit of ability accuracy reduction, and also makes for a very good defender as well, because he's a pain in the ass to fight on some nodes and can maybe trip up some bleed champions. Both of the Cyclops champions, while they're not the best, they're very fun bursty champions to play. I quite like them. Storm, very fun bursty champion, got a very high chance to stun on her special attacks, awesome when awakened. Really like playing Storm. Magneto's not the best champion, but he's alright. He's got a little bit of energy damage. If there's anything that ever you know, has some sort of criteria of physical contact, like for example Morningstar's bleed when awakened is only on physical contact, and Magneto's attacks are all energy damage, so you can play a Magneto around a Morningstar to get you know, to maybe work around that if you don't have any other options. OG Deadpool, not included on this list, but he's just very good for regeneration. But yeah, not really available anymore. Beast is he's an alright champion. He's got a nice stunner, special attacks, some alright damage output, a little bit of regen as well. I think the thing is with Beast, he just very much falls in the shadow of champions like X-23, Rogue, and also Wolverine, and well, really all of the top 5, to be honest. I think all of those champions are much more effective to have at max rank than a Beast is, but, you know, I like playing my 3-star Beast now and again, and the 4-star one as well. Deadpool X-Force, not really too great. He's very outdated. This character needs a little bit of a revamp to be a little bit more Gwenpool-esque, because yeah, he's got a very mediocre bleed when awakened. I don't really rate this character too much. Colossus, bleed immune, doesn't deal too much damage, but has a lot of armor, which isn't really too useful for much stuff. So yeah, Colossus is a bit ass. Old Man Logan is just, he's just, again, a similar problem to Beast, that he lives in the shadow of characters like Wolverine, X-23 and Wolverine. So yeah, and then we finally have the right down the bottom, we have the Marvel Now version of Magneto, who is just a little bit of a less desirable version of Magneto. He has slightly higher base stats, ever so slightly, we're talking like a couple of %, but he does not have the synergies that the classic Magneto has, and a lot of the mutant characters are very popular for the way that, you know, Storm, Magneto, Cyclops, and Wolverine, they form this incredible mutant team synergy, which gives you like a ton of additional attack, a ton of additional crit damage. Like, it's a really kind of a nice bundle of stats to have together. But anyway, ladies and gentlemen, hopefully you enjoyed today's first top 5 video on the mutant class. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to smash that like button, that'd be greatly appreciated. Apart from that, thank you very much for watching, take care, and I hope that you have an absolutely fantastic day.